Carcharodontosaurus, old shark-toothed lizard. This seems to be a very popular theropod dinosaur, but despite that fact, it really doesn't show up too frequently in media or documentaries or anything, which is a huge shame because it's one of those theropod dinosaurs that would rival something like the Tyrannosaurus Rex in size, as well as just being really cool in its own right. We already looked at several iterations of the Spinosaurus in media, so now it's time to look at this boy and see the few times that it has shown up in media and kind of talk about their overall design each time. So we'll start off with documentaries because that's actually the most plentiful place that Carcharodontosaurus had shown up, even though the few times it has shown up in documentaries has been kind of sparing, to put it lightly. First up in Monsters Resurrected. Now, its appearance in Monsters Resurrected is pretty disappointing. It's only there to be kind of like that giant theropod that lived with Spinosaurus and was the kind of underdog to the Spinosaurus. I mean, seriously, there's very limited B-roll shots in Monsters Resurrected, and the few times it does show up, it's just cannon fodder, really. And that is, of course, a huge disappointment, but to be fair, that little episode wasn't focused on Carcharodontosaurus, so, you know. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes of it all. The design. It's a cool design. It has the perfect shape of a Carcharodontosaurus. Like, one of the most important things I'd say is probably the skull shape, because for the most part, when it comes to theropod dinosaurs, the body is often portrayed pretty well. But the skull does have the correct shape, although this is something that is very common, I find, with Carcharodontosaurids, is that it's extremely shrink wrapped. And what that basically means is that they don't really have a lot of meat on their bones. Shrink wrapping is where you pretty much have the skeleton and then a thin layer of like muscle and fat, and then you put the skin on. So you can see things like the fenestra on its skull. And like I said, that's something that I find is very common in designs when it came to Carcharodontosaurids in general. But other than that, I think that the design is very cool, and it's a shame that it was kind of utilized the way that it was in that episode. But next up, we have Dinosaur Planet. Showed up in Alpha's egg, which was a cool little thing. This whole series was really cool. The whole idea of following like a single dinosaur as they go on a little bit of a journey and then kind of sprinkling in some facts here and there was just really fun, and of course it was something that I was obsessed with. Now, Carcharodontosaurus showing up where it does is incorrect. Of course, Carcharodontosaurus lived in Africa, whereas that specific episode took place in South America. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they were based on potential megaraptorids that lived in the area, but I'm not too sure if that's correct. Feel free to correct me in the comments. But that aside, the design looks pretty decent as well. Now, of course, it has the basic Carcharodontosaurus head shape, which again is important, as well as a little bit of a thicker body. You know, it's not nearly as shrink wrapped. I mean, the skull is a little bit shrink wrapped, but not too bad, at least not compared to the first one. And of course, it, you know, has things like relatively short arms and things like that. It's a good Carcharodontosaurus design in general. Not really a lot of room to complain about it. But we have Dinosaur Planet, and now you swap those two words and you get Planet Dinosaur. The Planet Dinosaur Carcharodontosaurus. There are too many Planet documentaries. But the Planet Dinosaur one, at least for me, is extremely iconic. I mean, it was probably one of the highlights in that entire show. That show was also awesome. It's another thing that I watched practically on repeat, and its portrayal of Carcharodontosaurus was really fun to see. It was definitely shown as more so, you know, an apex predator in its area, which it likely was, rather than kind of being cannon fodder to any other large theropod dinosaurs. You know, it was likely something that kind of stuck to its ecological niche and, you know, competed wherever it saw fit. The design looks cool. The most striking thing that I would say with it is the colors. I like the contrast between the darker and the lighter colors, as well as the really dark head and the kind of pronounced crests, the lacrimal crests. That's something that I think looks really cool on the animal. The skull looks good. All in all, very cool design. And a lot of times the first thing I think of when I think of Carcharodontosaurus. Moving on from the documentaries, we have video games. Now, the first one being the Ark Carcharodontosaurus, which for starters is absolutely massive, but everything in Ark is pretty much scaled up, so you know it looks like a Carcharodontosaurus in the skull where it matters the most, but it is of course covered in spikes, and you know this is the way the Ark is. They have very stylized dinosaur designs to really kind of fit their fantasy setting of a game, and this definitely fits. You know, it's a really cool design in that aspect. Definitely no ranking in accuracy when it comes to video games like this. It's just a very cool design design, and is certainly one that stands out amongst most other Carcharodontosaurus designs. And now we have Jurassic World Evolution. Now this might be one of the first designs that I genuinely don't really like. There's just something that feels off about it. I don't know if it's the proportions, I don't know if it's just I don't know. It's not really a design that I'm too much of a fan of. It pretty much does have the Carcharodontosaurus skull shape, but it feels a little bit more elongated. I don't know what it is. I don't think it is. Maybe I'm crazy, but it feels like it is. It also has a row of spikes going down the spine and, you know, up to the skull. And it has one that's kind of poking up in the middle of the skull. Definitely reminds me of a Majungasaurus. That's also something that I don't like. In terms of designs, it's not really one that I gravitate towards, and this isn't even considering accuracy. It's just not really a design that I'm a fan of. But moving on from that, we'll go to the classic, that being Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, and son of a gun. This one is cool, if nothing else because of the coloration. Now it has, you know, the darker body with the red crests. Now that looks very cool. I feel like this is incredibly iconic, if nothing else because of this color scheme. It just pops. I really like it. Now the skull shape is a little bit different than what we're used to for Carcharodontosaurus, and I think mainly that's because they've incorporated once again the lacrimal crests, as well as kind of a nasal ridge that, you know, goes down the snout, as well as giving it kind of a broader skull than what we were used to for the animal. Definitely an interesting design choice, but I really like it, especially in the context of the game, because it does stand out from the other theropod dinosaurs. And I really wish that we were able to see kind of like this design transferred over to Jurassic World Evolution, because I just think it looks really cool. And that does it for the video games. And finally, we have TV shows and movies. Now, of course, I mentioned that Carcharodontosaurus really has not shown up too much, and that's especially true for TV shows and movies. I mean, I haven't been able to really find anything that has shown up. Carcharodontosaurus, in terms of the general public, might as well be pretty obscure, but it has shown up in Dinosaur King, the classic anime of my childhood, and the design looks really good. It has the correct skull. I like the coloring, and probably the thing that stands out the most are the fight scenes in that show. It had really cool fight scenes against Terry and the Carnotaurus, whose name I am spacing on. It was a very cool addition. Dinosaur King just had a lot of dinosaurs. Like, I was doing a video on my TikTok about Deltadromeus, and turns out they had Deltadromeus in Dinosaur King, which is not something that I knew as a kid because I didn't know about Deltadromeus when I was a kid. And this is a design that is stylized for its show, and I think that it fits pretty nicely. So yeah, those are probably the most popular appearances of Carcharodontosaurus in media and documentaries and things like that. There really weren't too many, which, you know, is a big shame because Carcharodontosaurus is a cool dinosaur, but whenever it does show up, then it, you know, it's kind of special in a way. But anyway, that's all I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.